My name is Siddhartha Khosla, and I am the composer for Only Murders in the Building. The key to a good theme song, it's always about the melody. I worked on This Is Us for 6 years with my friend Dan Fogelman. Dan introduced me to John Hoffman, who co-created Only Murders in the Building. And the way that introduction happened was Dan sent me the script. During the pandemic, a lot of productions stopped. I decided that I wanted to write like my own instrumental orchestral record, just like for myself. And I started writing this couple pieces of music, like basically like right before I'd gotten the script. I just started like toying around with stuff. And on the Zoom call with John, I played him a couple of those pieces. And he was like, that's the vibe of my show right there. And then at the same time, when I read the script as well, I presented John this melody. And John was like, what is that? And I was like, it's just this melody with these bouncy chords I'm doing. And he said, that makes me feel mystery, makes me feel drama, it makes me feel lonely, it makes me feel happy, it makes me feel fun. He's like, can you finish it? And then that became the main theme of the show. I know that the producers wanted the score and that theme to sort of feel like it was a mix of classic and modern. That's what everyone kept on saying to me. My influences from my band world come from like the 60s music that like I love. Beach Boys, Donovan, the Beatles, and so much of that music had that sort of quarter note. Jing, 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 didn't, jing, jing. I have a band called Gold Spot. One of my early records was called And the Elephant is Dancing. And it was a very sort of Beach Boys inspired record. And I did a bunch of that sort of quarter note bouncing. I oftentimes will come up with a melody just on my voice. That's sort of the way, I write. And then eventually I find a way to put that vocal idea on something else. So what I did for the longest time was have my voice in there.
I use this mellotron. There are these like ridiculous like choirs in here. So this is like the boys choir going. So all that mixed together, there's even like an all ladies choir, there's a men's choir. So I combine all that, and this is sort of what you get as the melody, just the melody alone with the voices.
And that was all like placeholder in my head. But when I sent it in, there was something cool about it because like my voice mixed with like the mellotron voices, it almost sounded like my voice had been slowed down. It felt like it was going through like some tape sampler. And I was like, this is kind of cool. And I was like, let me just see what the producers say about whether we're going to leave this or whether we're going to go. And we did, and they were like, don't touch this. This is cool.
So when I wrote the theme for Only Murders in the Building, I had this melody in my head and this quarter note sort of chord progression on my piano. And I put this paper inside my piano just so, you get this sort of like papery sort of percussive sound to the piano. One of my favorite things on this is I play flute on some of this, but I'm just like making ridiculous noises and sounds with my flute. So I'm basically doing stuff like just making ridiculous sounds that ended up like, honestly, most of this was like me just messing around thinking that these were like I wasn't gonna keep any of this, but then if you hear it in the recording, we end the main title sequence on a lot of that. And that in the mix of everything is... Big part of the glue of this piece is our live orchestra. This is 40 musicians, a mixture of winds and strings all together.
Dan Fogelman taught me the art of finding a strong theme that can sort of be used and sort of make something that's so malleable that it can work in joyful scenes as much as it can work in sad scenes and romantic scenes. And if you hear this theme, it sort of does that in the show. I have other themes too in the score, but this one that's in the main title, you'll also hear that over like Amy Ryan and Steve Martin in some of their scenes from last season, like some of their romantic scenes. So the producers weighed in when they heard my first pass at this, and there were no drums or anything on it. And Dan called me and he's like, how do you make this like as tough as possible? How do you bring in the New York into all this? We started having the conversation about New York, the socioeconomic diversity of New York, this idea that you can walk down the street in New York and you can see people with incredible amounts of wealth, and then you can just turn your head for a moment and then see a homeless person on the street, or you can see someone in the subway making music on Home Depot buckets. And that's when we had James Callister, my drummer, we asked him to get like a bunch of Home Depot buckets and create a drum kit out of them. And he played these buckets. And when he sent it back on top of the track, we were like, that's it. And I was so excited to send it to the producers. I sent it in and everybody was like, that's it right there.
So you can hear all the Home Depot buckets. It's like pots and pans, Home Depot buckets. He actually like set up a drum kit of buckets and pans and mic'd it. He's such a creative drummer and he added so much. Like, it's just a great sound.
I wanted to find something that felt incredibly cinematic. You know, Steve and Marty, as we know, are comedic legends, and Selena is like right up there with them now. It's just amazing. I made an effort to stay away from scoring the comedy of the show and really scoring the dramatic beats of the show, the mystery of it, the loneliness, the drama. And so I wanted to score this. Like, I remember, you know, the producers came back and they're like, you're approaching this like a prestige drama. And I was like, because it is to me, I was like, let the comedy play the way it's going to play, and then let me sort of underscore the sort of dramatic beats. So once we had this theme, and I knew this was going to sort of become our hero theme of the show, I started playing around with different instrumentation. And I was like, you know, I was like, this score in my mind needs to sound like the inner walls of the Arconia. At the same time, we are in New York City in the present, and it needs to have a modern sound to it too. So I think in terms of finding sort of like my classic sort of sound, I immediately thought of the bassoon, and I sent out the producers, and I got a mixed reaction. They all loved it, but they were not telling me something. And then they said, okay, well, you know, and they thought about it and then finally came back and they're like, yeah, that's good. And I think in retrospect, they may have known that the killer was going to be the bassoonist. And maybe I might have been inadvertently like giving a clue, and we committed to it. And the bassoon was everywhere that first season. And then it ended up being a happy accident when we found out that Jan did it and she was the bassoonist.